everyone, and welcome to another 5-9 Gaming Review. My name is Tallen, and today I'm joined by Goresh and Trocho, and we are going to discuss and review The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD Remake, available on the Switch. But Tallen, the game is old and it's just a port. Why review something that's been out for so long? Well, that's partly true. For this review, we're going to change things up a bit, though. Instead of covering our regular points that we would for a review, we are going to look at what has changed for the HD remake, so that includes things like gameplay, graphics, etc., and to see if it's truly worth the $60 since this is a 10-year-old game. I mean, Nintendo never lowers their prices. Looking at you, Mario Kart 8. But as always, make sure to let us know your thoughts down below in the comments on the remake and what kind of score you would give it, and if you agree with us. And of course, if you happen to enjoy this type of content, then don't forget to like the video and sub to stay up to date on all our reviews. With all of that out of the way now, let's get into our review of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD.
Hey guys, Goresh here, and I'm going to be covering the audio and graphics section of the review. The original Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword was essentially a game that was created to be remade. The game had such breathtaking landscapes, jaw-dropping dungeon layouts, and simply some of the best art we've ever seen in any Zelda game, just to have it all locked away behind a max resolution of 480p and 30 frames per second. With the HD version, you can finally experience the game in much better looking 1080p and 60 FPS, which makes everything look way better and feel much smoother. In terms of the audio, I didn't really have any particular complaints about the audio of the original version, but when talking about a Zelda game, one of the most important things to mention and bring up is the OST, music, and sound effects in general. I think Skyward Sword is some of the best Zelda OSTs in the entire franchise, whether it's, Skyloft or Girahim's theme. They all sound so good throughout the game, and when I was playing through this game with headphones, that's going to be, sort of altering my opinion on the sound effects in the OST, so my opinion might be a bit different than those playing with speakers, but in terms of the audio, I just have zero complaints about anything related to the sound quality, volume mixing, or anything of that nature. So in totality, the audio gets a thumbs up from me.
Hey guys, Trevor here to talk to you guys about the quality of life and other changes section. So Skyward Sword HD had a lot of small to a couple substantial changes, most just being quality of life though. But before we get to the biggest change, let's talk about some of the smaller ones. So first up, Fi talks to you much less than she used to. Most of her forced dialogue is now gone, and this is definitely a really helpful change. It just speeds up the flow of the game a ton. Next up, item text boxes only appear once. If I recall correctly, in the Wii version, every time you saved and quit, the next time you load back into the game, you get a text box alerting you what every item is when you pick it up. Thank you, game. I already have 70 beetles, but maybe I forgot what it was since the last time I played 8 hours ago. This was definitely a much needed change. Now there are some other changes, but not as important as the ones I mentioned, or really the next couple. Like 60 FPS, but I'd hope a Wii port of a game from 2011 in 2021 would be 60 FPS, so good job Nintendo, you did it. And now we have the biggest change that didn't even really change a lot. Button controls. These controls kinda suck. They're really clunky. Not that great of a design overall. The game was built completely around motion control, so I can't really bash it too much for not being that great, but at the same time, it's Nintendo. They could have done a proper remaster of the game, not just an upscale with some quality of life changes. I really wanted button controls to work near perfectly, but they feel kind of shoehorned in for the sake of it. Maybe it's because of the Switch Lite they felt they had to add this, but 1-2 Switch was left off, so who knows. I guess it's because it's a mainline Zelda game and they didn't want to exclude all the Lite users. Either way, I would have preferred a true overhaul of the game's mechanics for button controls to work as well as they do in other entries. Or no button controls at all, but letting the game have even better motion controls with the tech the Joy-Cons have compared to Wii remotes. Now, that's pretty much the biggest change in Skyward Sword HD. Of course, there's stuff like amiibos, but whatever. Most of them are really good, with some being average, but it definitely makes the game a much better experience than the Wii version.
All right, now that we've gone through everything, guys, basically, let's go and just take a look at what do all three of us think in our just our personal opinions, which is out in the open right now. What do we all think about it? Me personally, I've had my ups and downs with the HD remake, and I think a lot of that actually has to not really do with the story or anything, because I actually do enjoy the story and just the, a typical Legend of Zelda game and everything like that. It was definitely the controls, I think. I went back a lot and forth between both the motion controls and using the controller, and I think I finally settled on the controller. While I'm still occasionally just randomly taking my sword out just by hitting the right stick, I am slowly starting to get used to it, but I think it just goes to show that over time, while obviously the original game was made to use the Wiimote and all those motion controls in Junction and everything, it just hasn't aged as gracefully as, in my personal opinion. You can completely disagree with that if you want, but for me, I would definitely say I think it has not aged that well, especially when we go back and you play something like Breath of the Wild, which is obviously came out after the original release of Skyward Sword. And it just makes a lot more sense with the direction they went with the Breath of the Wild game. And it kind of shows that Skyward Sword was almost like a, using air quotes here, beta for some of the functions that were used in that. So overall, I still find the game very enjoyable and everything. From my personal opinion score though, I'd probably give it around 7.5, 7.58 or so out of 10. I think is a very reasonable score for this game.
Hey guys, Trocho here once again. Now, I already gave some of my personal opinions before the changes section, but now I can go a bit deeper. This is a pretty garbage move by Nintendo. Skyward Sword HD is the most accurate title it could have had. It's the exact same game with the bare minimum done. The fine text box stuff should have been how the game was originally, so I can't really give Nintendo credit for fixing a 10-year-old mistake. 1080-60 is also pretty much the bare minimum for a game of this scale, so cool. They didn't really do much with this game. Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD both had a lot more done to their games than this did, and for the price being higher than the original release, it's kind of insulting. I'm not a fan of this re-release, it's just another example of modern day Nintendo not caring at all. If this is your first time playing Skyward Sword, then sure, it's a good buy. If you were to play it on the Wii, don't bother, just play that version again if you have to. Now I do want to clarify, I don't hate Nintendo as a whole, just modern day Nintendo. The Switch having no customization, virtual console, as well as overlooking Joy-Con drift and mediocre performance for their flagship games, I'm not too happy with the direction Nintendo has taken after Iwata passed. It seems like the Nintendo seal of quality days are long gone. But with all that said, I'd give Skyward Sword a 7 out of 10, but this version doesn't even really deserve that, so it's hard for me to say.
As for my overall personal opinion on the game, I am definitely an outlier in the Zelda fandom, because while most people heavily criticize the original Skyward Sword for things such as the forced motion controls and fairly linear story progression, I actually view this game as one of the absolute best in the entire franchise. This is definitely an unpopular opinion, but I adored the motion controls of the original game, and while I would have appreciated a bit more freedom in terms of choosing where to explore next, I really had no issues with the way Nintendo decided to design the overall story of the game. And that takes me to my personal biggest criticism of the HD remake, which is the implementation of the traditional control scheme. If you guys have tried playing Skyward Sword HD with a Pro Controller, which by the way is what I used during my playthrough, you'll quickly notice that it's rather difficult to control the camera, the direction you want to slash your sword, as well as a lot of other aspects of the game. Now, while I'm thankful that the HD remake at least introduces a way to actually control the camera, unlike the original game, I wish they had made it a bit easier to maneuver. As for the combat controls, I'm not going to critique it too harshly, just because the game was originally created to solely be played using motion controls, and I don't think that they did too bad of a job here, just in terms of working with what they had. But it definitely could have been better, for sure. And if you really can't stand the traditional control scheme, there's always the option, to go back to motion controls with the Joy-Cons. Overall, I would give The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD an 8.5 out of 10. For me, the game delivers on the main thing that it set out to do, which was to improve the graphics and create a more visually stimulating environment to adventure through. The reason why it didn't receive a higher score from me is due to the traditional control scheme just being way too clunky and awkward to use, while that was very clearly the largest complaint that most people had of the original game. So you would have thought they might have put a bit more effort into that aspect of the remake.
All right, everyone, and there we go. We have given you all of our thoughts and opinions on this HD remake for the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Again, the Legend of Zelda series is huge to a lot of people. A lot of people are going to have their own favorite games, their own personal opinions. So again, let us know all your thoughts down below in the comments. Me personally, while I did enjoy this game, I'm always going to be a little biased towards something like Twilight Princess, whereas someone like Goresh might be a little bit more towards Wind Waker or Ocarina of Time. But regardless, we all enjoy these Legend of Zelda games. So again, let us know your thoughts down below in the comments when it comes to this particular series. And, just overall, what did you think about Skyward Sword if you happen to play it, or you just simply seen the reviews and the gameplay? And just what is actually your favorite Zelda game? Just let us know, whether it's all the way back from the original or all the way up to Breath of the Wild. What are your thoughts? Let us know all of it down below. And of course, guys, don't forget to hit that sub button if you happen to enjoy the content and you want to see more. Hit the notification bell, leave a like on the video as well. It actually really does help us, and it's all free. It doesn't cost you a thing. So anyway, guys, I've been Tallen with 5-9 Gaming, though. Goresh and Trocho, again, thank you so much for joining me in this review, and we hope to see you guys in the next one. Johnny.